talking about those amygdala and cortex. Hey,
All right, we're
good
live.
afternoon, everyone. We're live on
Hey
another.
everyone,
So
welcome
today
back.
we have a very special podcast. Mark, would you introduce the theme of today's podcast?
We're going to be speaking about something that hits very close to home for me, something that I've dealt with at a personal and professional level for my entire life, and that is ADHD, Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, or ADD, if without the hyperactivity.
And can you define those terms for the audience if they're not familiar with it? And what's the difference between ADD and ADHD?
Sure. So ADHD, like I said before, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder is a brain level difference in how attention, motivation, and self-control systems are wired and chemically regulated. So basically, similar to other neurobiological disorders, you have brain networks that are implicated in certain neurotransmitters like norepinephrine and dopamine, which are being transmitted at dysregulated levels between the synapses. So this is affecting your cognition, your ability to focus, your motivation, your ability to uh, attain goals, to hold goals in your mind. And there's a big link, and I'm really excited to talk to you about this as well, between how the increase in use of devices might be leading to the onset of ADHD-like symptoms. So ADHD, the hyperactivity part often describes like excess energy, and restlessness, inability to stay in one spot. ADD is probably like the cousin of that. It's without the hyperactivity, so without the excess energy, without running around. Just basically think absent-mindedness, rumination, inability to focus on tasks, just staring out the window without all the hyperactivity and running around, of course.
Thanks for explaining, Mark. And also, thanks for being open. You have been in the team since the beginning, sharing that you have been dealing with ADHD. And now we're here, perhaps to the world, sharing your story. And I think it's very important that, people don't have this label or the stigma anymore and can talk about their neurodivergence. We have several people in our team with ADHD. We have other neurodivergence. And it's okay to talk about it. Actually, it makes it better when you communicate, when you know yourself better, when you know your colleagues better, your family better. I
Mhm.
think that's a very good step. And can you explain maybe to the audience the concept of being wired for distraction? So, is it from ADHD, ADD, from using devices, from the cultural norm right now that has been distraction after distraction? How
Yeah.
can we be wired biologically and culturally for distraction?
Well, I've mentioned this neuroscientist multiple times on this podcast, but Adam Ghazali, he wrote the book, The Distracted Mind, and he uses an example in that book that really spoke to me, which is that um, our brains evolved as information gathering organs, right? So think of it this way, we had our ancestors who were hunter-gatherers, um, scavenging for food, right? Especially the gatherers were looking for food. And when you would find a nutrient dense food item in the environment, say honey, that was sweet, uh, our taste buds evolved to just reward us immensely when we would find honey because that was a source of nutrients in a nutrient scarce environment, right? And so similarly, the brain evolved in a way to reward us when we uh, gain a valuable piece of information, right? And that's how it has evolved over, thousands of years, right? The problem is, however, just like with food, we live in a no longer a nutrient scarce environment, but a nutrient dense environment. So companies, especially food companies, have weaponized sugar, right? To the extent where we're dealing with an obesity epidemic in many countries around the world. People are unhealthier than ever. because we're still working with this primitive ancient hardware. The same goes for information, right? It wasn't as much a problem 50, 60 years ago as it is now because we are living in an information dense environment. And advertisers have weaponized this to their advantage because attention is the most valuable commodity on the market today, right? And so anything that advertisers can do to take your attention is going to be used in their benefit and their interest and not yours. So what is this doing? Well, it conditions us in a way to have much more distributed attention processing. It's harder for us to focus on things because of the way that we interface with technology and the amount of notifications that we get and the amount of tasks that we are dealing with on a day-to-day basis. And we're seeing higher numbers of people presenting themselves at clinics complaining about ADHD-like symptoms. And because the demands are also being increased on us as we try to compete with things like AI nowadays, and we just can't. We can't think like that. And I think the more and more that it gets to this point, the harder it's going to become to differentiate ourselves.
Well, thanks for putting the context in terms of the culture, and then we'll go a bit more into biology. And if those are tuning in who don't know, both Mark and I are neuroscience, so perhaps geeks. So we read articles for fun and talk about brain stuff, but we'll try to keep it interesting. If we stray, let us know. And more importantly, all those joining live in the LinkedIn, X, Twitch, YouTube channels, please feel free to comment at any time. We will respond, and we have different sections as well. We're talking about wired for distraction right now. If you have some ideas about this specific topic, make sure to write a comment, and we'll go through sections and sections, and maybe improvise and talk about things that we'll figure out about Mark and ADHD. So let's go back a little bit to the story about biology, right? So there is this cultural you mentioned. So our brain is wired in a way to have attention. Um, and what does the ADHD brain look like in general? And is it that from birth? Is it influenced by genetics, by environment, a bit of both? Can you explain a bit more about that?
Yeah, so ADHD is mostly hereditary. It twin studies have shown that it has around 70 to 80% heritability. So it is a highly heritable trait. And normally, if you have parents who have had it, there's a high likelihood that you're going to have it as well. It's just that I would say it's beginning to get a lot more press exposure than it used to in the past, just because of the different types of demands that are being put on us nowadays that perhaps during the industrial age weren't there, but nowadays people are being tasked with looking at a computer screen and solving problems all day, and that seems to be very difficult for a lot of people with ADHD. But to the other part of your question, which is like, what does ADHD look at a neurobiological level? Well, the ADHD doesn't imply that there's any part of your brain that's necessarily damaged, right? It's more about different networks that regulate attention, motivation, and your inhibition, so your self-control, right? So you have like the frontal striatal circuits, and those are count the prefrontal cortex and the basal ganglia, and then you have the frontoparietal control networks. And meta-analyses. So I when I was in my master's degree, I did fMRI meta-analysis on participants who were resting state, meaning they're just doing an fMRI scanner, so functional magnetic resonance imaging. It's a way to measure basically activity going on in the brain. And what these analyses show is that you have reduced activation in certain parts of the brain in people with ADHD. So in like the right inferior frontal cortex and the anterior insula. So this implies that people have greater difficulty with inhibition and stopping their responses, right? Anterior cingulate cortex and supplementary motor area. So monitoring conflict, effort. All of this implies that there is subtle but consistent brain differences in people with ADHD and normal brains. And but it doesn't necessarily imply that there's anything deficient. It perhaps just implies that tasks that are easy for some people just might be much more difficult for other people with ADHD.
Thanks, Mark, and thanks also the marketing team for showing some images of the brain. I encourage anyone that wants to know more to contact us. If you want to know some geek out neuroscience, we can do that. Or if you see this on replay, pause and you can read and go through those different steps. So yes, we talked about different areas of the brain, different networks. We know, for instance, that there's the default mode network that is perhaps a bit more active in ADHD, and that could be not useful in terms of rumination and not being able to make decisions, being distracted. But there's also a good thing about the default mode network. Maybe creativity. Can we have more imagination? What are some of the positive things that the ADHD brain can have?
Yeah, so I think this is the part of the podcast where it's like helpful if I share like what my personal experience, my lived experience with ADHD has been like. And I also want to like just um, reaffirm here. I mean, I am not a medical professional giving medical advice on this. This is my experience. If you want to seek help from a psychiatrist, who can prescribe medications, do that. Christian and I are both neuroscientists who do have a lot of knowledge about this area. But if you're looking to seek medical help, then go seek a psychiatrist about this. With that in mind, I'll carry on and I'll say that the default mode network is something that you see overactive in people with depression and depressive disorders, ADHD as well. And what that means is that you have an active mind even when you're at rest, mind wandering, internal thoughts, daydreaming. Default mode network is part of your brain that's responsible for thinking when you don't think that you're actually really thinking. And this is something that becomes really apparent when you're meditating. So I was diagnosed with ADHD when I was 17. I took medications for a few years. I took it throughout college. I made the conscious decision when I was 23 that I wanted to stop because I didn't want to spend my life taking medications. I wanted to explore what activities I enjoy doing.
Can you
And
share with the audience what type of medication you had? Not necessarily the
yeah,
brand name, but what type and what that does?
yeah. So I took dextroamphetamine. And so what that was is that it blocks some of those neurotransmitters that I talked about before, like dopamine, norepinephrine, reuptake or increase the release, specifically in like the prefrontal cortex and the striatum. And this will strengthen task-related frontal striatal activity, and it helps suppress the default mode network and off-task activity. So it just
And
helps.
how do you feel when you're taking those medication? Do you feel
Yeah.
more focused? And is there some positive and side effects as well that you felt specifically?
Yeah, from the medications that I was taking, I definitely felt more focused. The first 2 hours I would almost describe as euphoric, like just extremely optimistic, positive that anything was possible in life, and like really just high levels of motivation, levels of like euphoria, just feeling great. And then I think after 2 hours, that feeling abated, and you would just be like more focus, but without like the really happy, positive feelings all the time. One of the consequences of taking that specific medication was it was an appetite suppressant. So it would probably have like a potency of around 12 hours. And during those 12 hours, I would just be sitting in the library at my desk, and I would just be focused on like you could have given me like a picture of a tree, and I would have been fascinated by it if I was on those medications. I would have just been analyzing every single leaf and being like, oh my God, like this is, let's go find the cure for cancer. Like I remember taking it once, and I felt like, okay, while I wait for it to like kick in, I'm going to go on Facebook. And I spent 4 hours on Facebook just liking and commenting on pictures. And I was like, I need to leave the best like response ever, and like really detailed, perfect grammar. But the effect really was, 12 hours of focus, and for me, the consequences were appetite suppressant. So I did lose a lot of weight, and I did have irritability and mood swings um, after the drug was started wearing off in my body.
So, loss of sleep, irritability, mood. So, people around you felt that you had a different mood, or yourself, or both.
Yeah, so I think people around me would say that like I just seemed like kind of low mood, low energy. And keep in mind, like I was like 20, 21 at the time, right? So um, again, consult with your doctor when you take these strong psychotropic drugs. But also keep in mind, if you're a parent watching this, right, and you're struggling with a child who has ADHD, I understand this is something that's really tough to deal with. But also keep in mind that these drugs, they haven't been on the market for so long in the scope of human history. And you put a young child whose brain is still developing, and the brain of a boy does not finish developing until the age of 25. You put them on strong psychotropic medications. We don't really know what the long-term effects of that are. There have been rat studies that show a reduction in the size of striatum with long-term administration of ADHD medications. But we're kind of doing a mass experiment here, right, on kids. So I would just do your research, like try to inform yourself before you administer strong psychotropic drugs to children.
And if you don't want to read 12 hours or a week of a scientific article, we can have a chat.
Yeah, exactly.
You mentioned the man's brain don't stop growing until 25. I'm not sure mine has stopped, or maybe it should. I'm not sure how old I am, but it's the neuroplasticity is there,
Yeah.
hopefully. And you mentioned some side effects. I've also looked in some research that, like SSRIs, those might also affect libido or sex drive. Is that something that you experienced?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I just felt a lot less desire. Like libido was definitely lower. Um, they say that it messes with like your sweat production. I didn't really feel that one, but it definitely lower libido, lower appetite, um, were two of the consequences I felt from ADHD meds. But the big one for me was irritability, probably just the mood swings.
So you're more irritable than you normally are? Wow, that's okay.
when, when I was taking the meds. Yeah, yeah. I will also say another consequence or indirect consequence is that like the more you take, your tolerance goes up. It's just like taking a drug. So over time, I had to increase the dosage from 40 to 50 milligrams to 60 milligrams just to achieve the same effect, right? And what that means is that when you're off of the medications, that you have an even worse, poorer focus and concentration. I mean, it's even more difficult to concentrate when you're not on the meds. And I just felt that like whenever I wasn't on the medications and I was trying to look at a piece of paper, I just couldn't for the life of me get myself to focus.
Wow. I do want to take a pause as we had someone already ask a question on the chat.
Sure.
So the question is there any way to treat ADHD only with medication? And you can start with the response, or actually, I'll start with a response, and then you can give some live experience on that. So first of all, my answer would be that we can treat ADHD, but that's still the model of neurodiversity as a disease. So you have a disease, you treat it. It's like when you have a cold, you have to have your immune system kill the virus or the bacteria. The idea to me is that when we say treat something, through the lifespan, we will have different proclivities, and we have a brain that comes from the biology and from the culture. So I would say maybe treat the symptoms. You never treat completely a disease or a state. You cannot treat autism or giftedness or other neurodivergent traits, and you can have also combined traits of different symptoms that go hand in hand. And my general approach is that medication can be useful, and sometimes it can be enough to get you back to that baseline or whatever you want to consider that it's good enough for you to function. Because most mental disease are classified because they affect some areas of your health, your mental health, your relationships, your work. So if the medication helps you go back to what you wanted to, in that definition, that could be okay. But then again, the idea, and I think we talked about this with Dr. Mateka when he was Matika when he was on the show. Um, it's what is the goal of the medication? What is the goal, right? So if you don't know you're going to take pills and you don't know what they're supposed to do or what you want from them, then it's going to be very difficult to figure out if that's achievable. And
Yeah.
also, in most things, it's a holistic thing, right? So you might have the pills for a bit to get you back to baseline, but if you don't do other non clinical or non pharmaceutical things that go with it, which is, we'll talk about some of those things, but it could be um, getting more systems in because ADHD get distracted, the brain gets distracted. So maybe if you have more system and you build habits, that's helpful. I think you have done some mindfulness and that was helpful. You can talk about that. So
Hmm.
I think that it is possible that the medication will get you to point A to point B. It just depends. Do you just want to go to point B, and are you sure that you're not going to slip back to point A and need more medication? So my answer is it could be enough for something, but I would definitely encourage to look at other alternatives on top. So I'm not saying do not take medication. I'm saying if you do, also look at what else is available for you to gain that pattern that has been a disruption in your life or your kid's life in that case, if you're doing this with your children. So, what is
Hmm.
your response, Mark? What do you think about
I
this?
Yeah, I just want to make sure I understand the question correctly. Is it that is the only way to treat ADHD with medication? If
I think
so,
it's is it could it be treated only with medication? Is the question.
could it be treated only could it be treated only with medication? Well, medication is really helpful in treating it, and it's probably the most commonly accepted method to treating it nowadays, right? Not the only one out there, but it's probably the one that has the quickest, most fast acting solution, I would say. If you want to get a result quickly, medication is probably the best way to go. And the fact of the matter is that, especially in the United States or in Canada, we live in a culture of high achievement, right? High competition, high achievement. We praise people who get good grades, who, start businesses, who do things that are mentally like just difficult, right? They're very taxing on people, and they require a long hours of sustained attention and focus. So, a lot of times, and this was my experience again in college, when you are in a program like, let's say, pre-med programs are extremely competitive, right? Because it's very difficult to get into medical school, and they want to weed out as many people as possible out of these programs. So they make the classes like organic chemistry, biochemistry, microbiology, all these things extremely difficult to study for. So let's just assume that you want to be a doctor, right? But you have ADHD and you're having difficulty studying for an exam. And that's frustrating, right? Because you're not getting the grades that you would need to have a good GPA to be able to get into a good medical school. So you have this dream, but you realize that you perhaps don't have the capability to get that dream right now. Well, you can take medications, right? You can go get a prescription, and then all of a sudden you are capable of doing it, right? You just needed a little bit of pharmacological support, and that's totally fine. You can do that. There's nobody to stop you from doing that. Um, but at the end of the day, you will have to take this medication if you want to sustain that track long term of continuing to go to medical school, because if you continue taking medications and you apply to medical school, you get into medical school, you have to take medications during medical school, you have to take medical school medications during residency. and then you have to take medications if you're a neurosurgeon, right? Like, what are the consequences of all of a sudden stopping your medications? Once you're a neurosurgeon, you get really distracted in the operating room and you make a really crucial mistake, right? It's like, no, like your life is built upon taking medications, and accept that fate then that you might be taking medications for the rest of your life. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
thanks for the example. And you mentioned that you had to take more and more dose.
yeah.
Why did you decide to stop, and how did it go?
Oh, yeah. So I decided to stop because I noticed that when I wasn't taking medications, I couldn't focus on anything. It was really frustrating. And I won't say that I've completely overcome my ADHD now. I still feel a lot of drawbacks from it and some difficulties. Um, but that initial period was difficult because I had to adjust to life without it. Luckily, I wasn't in an environment that was very demanding. I wasn't in school anymore. I had just graduated from college and I was teaching English in a foreign country. And it was nice, not having those extreme demands. And I started meditating. I started doing mindfulness meditation. I started eating very healthy. I was dieting well. I was doing intermittent fasting. I was getting good sleep, 8 hours of sleep a night, eating, avocados, blueberries, like a very high omega-3 fat foods, like just really just eating well. And I was able to find a very clear and tangible goal at the time that motivated me, and I felt really compelled by that. And then I was like, oh, like I have no trouble focusing now because I found a tangible goal that like is really meaningful to me. And it was awesome. I didn't need any medication for that period of my life.
Would you mind sharing what that goal was?
Yeah, it was to get like a sales job at the time in tech. And I felt like I had a very clear understanding of what my capabilities were. I knew that I was very beginner, and I also knew that like what I could do during the application to differentiate myself, and a very clear plan. And I think for people with ADHD, when you have a very clear plan or tangible goal, right? Nothing like abstract, like get rich. Well, it has to be like very specific, like make $20,000 by the end of January 2026. That's a much easier goal for the ADHD mind to comprehend than just get rich, right? Because the ADHD mind needs some sort of benchmark that it can hold itself by. So for me, that benchmark was just getting a job, right, within 3 months, and I was able to make that happen. I was super motivated, and when you're playing the game of life, you have to have some guardrails to stay with, some rules of the game, right? If you don't have rules of the game, you're just all over the place. You're going in this direction, going in that direction, going up, down. But if you have guardrails, rules, you have to stay within a specific arena, right? You're following those rules, it becomes much easier to excel in that game. And that's what I would recommend for people with ADHD. Find out what the rules are and find out what the clear and tangible goal is. What is your ultimate vision?
Very useful. And it reminds me, yesterday I was actually watching a podcast with Alain de Botton, and he was explaining that that's not just people with ADHD, and now we can eventually talk about what's the percentage of people with ADHD today? Is it close to 10? And is it changing? And are we affected, or do we have ADHD-like symptoms? Well, we have a lack of attention, and that's because of screens
Yeah,
and technology. So that can, relate to not only people diagnosed with ADHD, but a lot of people. And the idea is that, before we used to have very tangible goals, right? So you go hunting, when we're hunting and gatherer, you might go for a few days, maybe a week, and then you get the beast, and you come back home and you eat, right? And that's like very tangible and time bound goal, right? Then you might have to, wait for the harvest, right? So a season could be we're going to plant this and wait for the next season, right? Now we have very complex, um, intangible, difficult goals, right? We're going to
yeah,
me and you were creating a business, right? We've been doing this for a year and a half, and we're not exactly where we want to, but we're very happy that we're there. But it's
yeah,
like, well, what's the goal? Are we gonna? We're thinking about something to help the world in 2 years, in 3 years, in 5 years, and like that. And how are we gonna get there? And what are the day-to-day steps that we need to get there? Right. So People have also, we're working with a small team. We're now 30 people at AWE, and we know each other, and it's fun. But some people are working in 5,000 or plus employees organization, right? So they're
Yeah.
working in one department, and they don't even understand the bigger picture of how they're doing something today. How is that impactful to the whole society or their colleagues? So it is getting more complicated to stay focused and motivated. And we've talked to HR leaders, and we see that that's also more complicated to have their teams motivated because or focused. They're easily distracted because what is that long term goal related to the dopamine of right now, right? I can be on my phone right now. I can watch another short. I can be
Yeah.
distracted by whatever, right? And I would say that, as you pointed out, someone who's more distracted, and that was like the end of the first section, is like we're wired for distraction, having ADHD or not, but we are wired for distraction anyways, and we're being more and more culturally prone to distractions, right?
Yeah. I mean, like when something just came to mind, which is like probably having ADHD in like the ancient environment was like a highly advantageous evolutionary trait because you had to be like hyper aware of what's going on. If a leopard jumps out at any time, you need to be able to like sense that danger, right? That's why like when you see like these videos of like gazelles in the African savannah, they're drinking, but they're always like, looking up. They're always like kind of like looking around. They're hyper like aware. So your brain, the ADHD brain is like almost in, I think Gabor Mate said this, but you're like in a state of like heightened uh, anxiety, like you're just very hyper focused on what's going on in the entire environment, right? And that's just a sense of overstimulation that's just overwhelming for a lot of people.
Yeah, we talked about the default mode network and the central executive thinking, and the other thing that we saw in the science is that it's not only that they are perhaps overactivated or less activated, they also have some issues with connectivity, right? So they
Yeah,
might be similarly activated, but they don't connect as much, and then they're not able to either focus on the motivation focus sector of the brain versus the distraction sector. And then there's this other network which is called the salience network, which is the one that when you hear a noise, you look. When you see something moving, you look.
for sure.
So that the salience network in ADHD must be higher as well to be distracted easily, right?
Oh, absolutely. And you're just getting distracted by external stimuli all the time, but it's also the internal ones that are highly distracting. And that's what we were talking about with the default mode network before. Overactive default mode network means that you have highly uh, dis mm, disordered internal state, meaning you've tons of images, thoughts, memories, rumination, things going on in your mind. And from the outside, people just maybe don't notice, but from the inside, you're just like a lot less aware. So when people tend to repeat themselves or ask questions and say like, uh, "Hey, Christian, what did we go have for dinner last night?" Mark, you asked me that question already like 5 minutes ago, right? And it's really frustrating for the other people to have to like hear that, but it's also the an ADHD mind is like having trouble recognizing what has been asked already and keeping clear tabs on that, right? I
Well,
often find myself also walking into rooms and just like forgetting why I walked into those rooms. What was I actually getting, right? It's frustrating for me, but now I've gotten to the point where I just kind of laugh about it. I'm like, yeah, this is just how my brain works, right? Something I
yeah,
have to
well, thanks
live
for
with.
sharing
Yeah,
those funny and real examples. And for those who don't know, the term rumination comes from cows that are ruminating on some grass and chewing. So it's kind of like chewing the same thing. So in the brain, it means like thinking the same stuff. So like again, you just said that before, right? So your brain is stuck in just repeating some same thoughts, and you really want to get out of that loop and be focused on something else. If we, go perhaps to talk a little bit, we talked about the networks. Let's talk about the chemicals, right? The beautiful cocktail of the acetylcholine, dopamine, and serotonin. what are some of the things that we know about the ADHD or ADD brain concerning the chemicals, and specifically, what do we know about the device and dopamine, and how is that maybe mediating some of those effects with ADHD?
Sure, there's two main neurotransmitters that people take into account when they talk about ADHD. First one is dopamine, right? That one is just super common in a lot of different cognitive processes, and then norepinephrine. And so in the prefrontal cortex and the striatum, remember striatum is the like the reward circuit of your brain.
Yeah.
Optimal levels of dopamine and norepinephrine ratio, give you a strong working memory signal. So what's working memory? So that's like basically when you are working on a task, your ability to hold a certain thought or idea for a brief moment of time while you're working on the task, not long-term memory, but working memory, right?
Hmm.
Good signal to noise ratio. So basically ability to understand of all the stimuli that I'm perceiving right now, which ones are the ones that are most meaningful and important to me, right? And the ability to delay rewards and stick with boring tasks. That's like the biggest one, right?
Yeah.
That's a really important one. So on
And
ADHD, like, mhm.
sorry, have we been desensitized to being bored? Like, is it? Can people be bored anymore, or they just they can't? It seems like
Yeah, I mean, that one just goes without saying for me. I think nowadays people are being conditioned in a way where their attention spans are shorter. And what that means at like a neurobiological level is that perhaps we just don't get the same amount of rewards from the same tasks, right? It's a diminishing rewards hypothesis. So attention spans get shorter, where we're less able to deal and tolerate with boredom. And essentially, what this means is that um, we're going to be just less able to have sustained focus, working memory, and ability to dissociate the signal from the noise.
very good. I just wanted to come back to some of the solutions. You talked like how you had at that time the goal to be to have a sales job, sales tech job, right? I think that also goes to other types of neurodivergence. We have, for instance, we know the giftedness spectrum and others that, and you can have double exceptionality, meaning that you might have giftedness and also ADHD and also perhaps autism or spectrum disorder. The idea is that when you have the ability to find something that has purpose, right? And that could be work, that could be relationship, that could be many things. When you have a strong purpose, even if you're neurodivergent, you can overcome many of those things because you know that you're going there, right? So Mark was going to get that sales job that he wanted, and now we're going to make this company great and the world better. And those things can drive you of purpose and meaning, and we also have a crisis of meaning. So the cultural aspect lessen our purpose, and then also exacerbate the ADHD symptom, which is if you're neurodivergent and you don't have a clear focus, you will be very easily distracted, right? So now we're more distracted and we have less meaning and purpose. Welcome back, Mark.
Yes, my island internet is sometimes playing tricks on me, so I apologize.
I thought it was your ADHD. You got distracted. You didn't want to
I
talk
got
to me.
distracted.
You forgot
Yeah,
we had a podcast.
yeah. Hit the wrong tab. But yeah, no, I mean to continue where we left off, like, yeah, John Vervaeke, he talks about the meaning crisis a lot of times, and I think nowadays we don't get meaning from the same uh, tasks that are required of us in like the modern workforce, and that's very frustrating for a lot of people. It used to be that as protector and provider, you're the hunter or you're the smith or blacksmith. You had a very tangible, uh, how do I say this, mm, role in society, right? People need to feel like they are useful in some way to their community. And I think nowadays it's harder for people to understand by completing an Excel spreadsheet or increasing shareholder value? How am I actually being useful to the society, to my community at large? And that's where a lot of the meaning crisis comes in here, right?
Great. Have you noticed specifically now that you're, off medication for many years, you're still dealing with some symptoms? Um, have you seen that, scrolling, watching content online has made the symptoms worse? Or is it like the egg? Is it possible that you can get ADHD symptom from nothing, being too much on devices and social media? Or is it possible also that if you have some symptoms, they get worse? I read some studies around that, that it's maybe 3 times more
Mm.
um, linked than normal. But I want your personal experience because you've probably lived some of that.
Yeah, well, again, this is my personal experience, but it's definitely like it gets worse the more I use my phone, the more I scroll, the more I spend time on YouTube, because it just feeds into what the ADHD brain wants. It just wants novel information, right? And you're just endlessly feeding it information, but you don't feel like you're in control. You're not creating that sustained focus for yourself, right? Being able to focus on like the boring tasks, right? The delaying the rewards, all that stuff. It's harder when you're conditioning yourself in a way that's benefiting other people, right? With your attention, you spending more time on these platforms. So definitely in my own lived experience, I've learned for myself that the more time I spend scrolling or watching videos, shorts are probably the worst, right? TikTok shorts. Um, the more my ADHD tends to flare up again.
And we touched on that. ADHD to treat ADHD is a disorder, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, right? Um,
Right.
can you say perhaps that again, if we stay away from labels and stigma, it is just the way your brain is made, and maybe we should try to understand it instead of labeling it and judging it?
Yeah, for sure. It's the brain is wired in a different way, right? I think people with ADD, ADHD uh, rank much higher on trait creativity than people who don't have it. For example, I come up with really strange ideas that I basically take disparate experiences and memories, and I'm able to connect them together, and I make really funny movies and videos out of that, right? But there, to some people, they're like, "How do you come up with this?" Right? And it's like, I cannot explain it. I just have like, um, my mind is going in a lot of different directions, and also when it comes to jokes and people are talking about things, I'm able to make two connections that perhaps other people wouldn't make normally in a conversation. It's just how the ADHD mind works. It's looking for a lot of different ideas and possible connections between two different things.
And thanks for sharing. As we say, like, you know, don't judge, accept, and see, and try to see the positive in everything. Right? It can be a struggle at some time, but there is some advantages to have different types of brain. And I think myself and the team really appreciate your jokes. So keep it up. And
Thank you.
in terms of other ways that you can express creativity, you have worked with some patients of yours and clients that have ADHD, and help them a little bit. Can you tell me maybe some of the ways, we can call it strength based training or therapy, where we focus on the strengths and the qualities instead of the disadvantages? And have you been able to do that with some of your clients?
Yeah, absolutely. So with some of my clients, I um, who have ADHD, that is, I do some mindfulness training where we focus on um, paying close attention to the breath. A lot of some of the things that we do in our digital resets on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So I have them focus on their breath and then notice any that they that their breath begins to or that the focus begins to waver and go to some thought in their mind. So if they're getting distracted by thought, I think it's really important that you become aware of the moment you become distracted. And if you don't become aware of the moment you get distracted, become aware of the fact that you are distracted, right? And gently bring your focus back to your breath. super important. It's like training a muscle, right? It's not necessarily teaching yourself to like say, oh, every time I get distracted in my normal life, just bring my focus back to my breath. And it's just teaching you to increase your that working memory capacity and the capacity to direct your attention consciously, which actually helps people in a lot of ways because it gives them a sense of agency over their life. Then it's like,
Hmm.
I can decide what I want to focus on, right? So that's the first step is, the practical application is focus on mindfulness training and then actually understand what is your long-term vision. Like, what do you want in your life? What are you trying to achieve? And if you are unhappy with some part of your life, if you're unhappy with your job, right, is it that that job is actually suited to you? Or is it that you perhaps need to explore something else, a different avenue, which is completely fine?
Great. Yes, I'm quite adept and love mindfulness and self-compassion and loving kindness and other types of um, meditation or presence, or different ways to call it. There's a lot of studying going on the effects of mindfulness. I'm studying other uh, ways to make people happy, including awe, including non-duality. I just did a reset yesterday, so the digital resets. If you're curious, you can go on our website and book a free reset. So
Hmm.
Thursdays, which yesterday is me, and Tuesdays is Mark, and we have slightly different ways to help you reset your mind and your body, and it can be specifically good for people that are needing of the less distraction. So that was something that you used for yourself and also with your patient, and you saw some results.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. The mindfulness aspect helped me so much when I stopped taking meds when I was 23. And with my patients, they've seen tremendous progress just from the ability to pinpoint these thoughts and emotions the moment that they rise and not fall into the same negative habits pattern and spiral.
So yeah, mindfulness we talked about quite a bit. We can call it presence, just being in the moment. And also today we are just announcing. You can also see on the website we have our new head of mindfulness education and wellness, Chris, that just joined the team to help us be even more mindful and help people be even more mindful in all our programs. So as the team is growing, we're going to be mindful of mindfulness, right? In terms of motivation, right? So have you found that there was times which is not only the distraction but also procrastination that was linked to some of those symptoms?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, when I binge watch YouTube, I tend to procrastinate more because, um, again, it comes down to the salience network. What is more salient to me is a fun, exciting video or video game that you're playing instead of doing the boring task of writing the paper, right? And you can blame yourself all you want, but like I think I heard something recently, which is that the reason video games are so appealing to people with ADHD is because they offer real consequences that people don't experience in real life, right? Which is like, okay, you can die in the video game and then you have to start all the way over again. And that makes the video game fun because there's something to lose, right? There's a real consequence in that game. But in day-to-day life, like what's the consequence of failing an exam? Well, it doesn't really feel real, right? It doesn't feel really interesting to a lot of people, right? So that's what becomes really frustrating in this game of life that people are playing is that like the consequences there are not tangible enough for people to understand. So for me, yeah, for sure. I mean, whenever I would binge watch or be on YouTube, video games, for sure, my procrastination got a lot worse. So the two are very tightly linked to each other. And there's a lot of discussion nowadays, especially in the field of academia, research, that says that, the term that we use for like behavioral addiction, internet addiction, internet gaming disorder, smartphone addiction, um, really could just be ADHD or ADD symptoms that we're seeing in the modern world of technology use, right? There is there are a lot of studies. Like there was recently a study by Menendez Garcia Jimenez. So it was a Spanish study, basically looking at internet, video game, mobile phone addiction in children and adolescents, and they found like a higher correlation between children with ADHD and mobile phone addiction than those who are not diagnosed with ADHD, right?
Yeah.
So, this thing goes both ways, right? It says basically that, again, chicken and egg, right? Is it the smartphones that are causing the ADHD, or is it the ADHD that's causing us to become addicted to the smartphones?
Probably both.
It's probably both, although, it is highly heritable, but like there is some discussion around whether the ubiquity of smartphones and devices is causing us to have these, to conditioning us to become more ADHD-like in a certain sense.
Well, yeah. I mean, genetics, right? So you can have the trait, but there's also other factors that make it express or not, right? And then
For
there's
sure.
also epigenetics. So maybe we are creating genetically more ADHD people as we're making ourselves more ADHD, right? So
Oh
uh,
yeah.
intergenerational, not trauma, but intergenerational lack of attention, right? So that's coming.
Oh, for sure.
Great. And would you find that like at any stage of the process of dealing with this that you felt like miserable or depressed or
Yeah, for sure. No, a lot of frustration, especially why aren't things working? Do I really have to take? I felt a lot of shame around having to take medications. Again, like, is this really like all that it's coming down to? So a lot of anger directed at myself because things weren't working out and because I just couldn't get myself to, and I started blaming myself. And I've done a lot of work on this, and I've come to terms that like I don't see this as a disability anymore. It's something that I just have to learn to work with. And yeah, it can become really annoying sometimes, but I just accept that's the way it is. And there's workarounds for it, right? If you're not interested in getting prescription medications, and I know in certain countries it's very difficult to obtain these. Germany, for example, is very notoriously difficult to get ADHD meds in Germany. They're highly regulated. It's not as easy as it is in the US, where you just go to a doctor and they'll prescribe you. I have trouble focusing. Okay, here's your ADHD meds. No, in Germany or in Europe in general, very difficult to get these drugs. Um,
I think it's
if
easier
you
to get Ritalin than candy in Halloween, no? In US?
in the US, yeah, because pharmaceutical industries have a stake interest in this.
Yeah.
But I would say if you don't have access to ADHD meds, there are some good alternatives. For one, I recommend nootropics. So these are a class of fungi that have cognitive enhancing effects. Lion's mane is a really good one. L-theanine, ashwagandha, uh, all these nootropics, check them out. You can find them on Amazon. They're really good. Mix them with coffee or caffeine. You'll get a really good boost from that. I think there's a coffee brand called Four Sigmatic. They sponsored the Joe Rogan podcast. They mix the coffee with lion's mane, and it's a really good, potent coffee that is not over the. It's non prescription ADHD medication that you can basically take. That working out, there have been studies that show getting like 30 minutes of aerobic workout 4 times a week has similar effects to SSRIs. So definitely can help with a lot of ADHD like symptoms. It definitely has helped me going to the gym a lot, having an active lifestyle. The food you eat, not a dietitian, I'm not a nutritionist, but this is my personal experience saying that the food I've eaten has definitely influenced my ability to focus. Nuts, berries, omega-3 fatty acids, avocados, that sort of stuff makes me feel really good and better able to focus. This morning I had cake for breakfast. Oof, just afterwards I had really trouble focusing for like 2 hours after breakfast. I was like, okay, no cake again for breakfast. Um, yeah, so just those simple sort of things, recommendations. Also, I think uh, I don't want to drone on too long, but I think habits, you spoke about the power of habits last time, and a lot of what we're talking about has to do with habits and conditioning. So when you talk about ADHD or behavioral addictions, keep in mind that you're responding to a certain internal stimulus, right? Boredom and unease, restlessness. You respond to that with some sort of reward that gets provided by like some funny video or pornography or whatever, right? But there's a moment between the stimulus and the response. And that is where your habits come up, your destiny, your conditioning. Um, Not so subtle plug for AWE, but we have developed a medical device that conditions you to rewire these responses so that you are more in control of how you direct your own attention, right? So instead of always constantly responding to the nonstop rewards of social media, the phone rewards you for engaging in behaviors that are conducive to your long-term goals, like reading a book, doing your homework, going to the gym, all this stuff. The phone will sense when you've done this and it will reward you with screen time in some sort of like operant conditioning sort of sense.
Thanks for sharing. Yes, the phone is pretty cool and it's science based and has some articles that people can read about the results. Um, I think when we're talking about habits, what I read preparing for this podcast is that the good thing about the ADHD brain is that it can develop habit as a neurotypical brain, right? So it might need a little bit more guidance, right? So there's more easily distraction, but once you do a habit and you train yourself, or someone helps you, coaches you, or a device helps you to do that thing, or you put the system in place, you're able to develop those habit like a normal brain, right? Or
For
whatever the
sure. Yeah.
more normal brain.
Normal brain. Yeah. Or just putting
The mid-
yourself in an environment.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And just putting yourself in an environment where you're set up to win, right? That's the big thing.
Mhm.
Like if you're going to isolate yourself at home and put yourself look at your smartphone all day, 10 hours a day, that's going to be tough. That's going to be really tough. It's you against these really powerful algorithms.
And a
Yeah.
powerful cocktail in your brain as well, right? So it's not only
Yeah.
about willpower. People say, "Oh, I'm sad. I'm a loser. I don't have willpower." No, you have the tech, the biology, maybe the drug, all stack against you, right?
Oh yeah.
So yeah, and the negative thoughts and limiting beliefs, and right. So if you need help, please reach out. You're not alone. There are many people that can help. As mentioned, we are not medically trained or psychiatrists, but we do have some free research. We have some tools, and we also do some coaching. As mentioned, um, Mark has had some ADHD symptoms and still has been able to
Yeah.
help a lot of people with those symptoms. So thank you for that community service. Um, and when we talk about calm, um, letting the thought not come, and making space between that potential reaction or distraction. Can you explain how this experience and working with people have brought you to put some of those concepts into into what we're doing?
hmm Yeah. So to the first part of the question, I mean, Viktor Frankl is the one who originally said there's a space between stimulus and response, and in that space is your freedom. So you get to decide how you want to. The problem is that, like with ADHD or with a lot of other conditions, that you have all these internal stimuli going on, and there's a lack of awareness around these stimuli, and then you respond unconsciously to these stimuli. So when you meditate, or what we do in these calm resets, we're trying to get you to become more aware of these internal states that are going on that you might be reacting to unconsciously. So we guide you through this reset, which is a guided process to focus on your breath, on your physical sensations in your body. Notice if you have any tension in your body, right? Relax and your shoulders. And by doing so, you'll see that certain thoughts come up, right? Oh, I have that thing I have to do next week. What did I have for dinner last night? What am I going to make for dinner tonight? I have to take out the trash, blah, blah, blah. All this stuff comes up. And just to notice that and acknowledge it, and then try to bring your focus back to what we're doing in the reset, which is being here, present, and right now, right? It's a tough process. In the beginning, it can be really frustrating. It feels like a Sisyphean task because you're just slipping back all the time into this unconscious sort of rumination. But the key is really just to stay consistent and try to bring your attention back to your breath all the time, just repeating, 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 and it's going to have some effect for you.
And can you explain why we decided to do those resets, not pre-recorded, but actually live, only at a specific time? What's the benefit or disadvantage of that?
Yeah, so the benefit is like you can listen to a guided meditation on YouTube or Headspace or Calm or a lot of these other apps, but it's an entirely different experience when you have a live human doing it who can actually offer you guidance in real time. Also, who knows you and is able to tailor the reset to you towards your needs. Um, and also, just on the other end, knowing that there's a live human talking to you um, makes you feel a lot more connected and present with that person instead of a recording.
Yeah, and not only the person talking, but the other people that are experiencing this at the same time, right? So now there's some
Sure.
people live. I'm live. I feel more connected than if I had a voicemail or read a text from you or saw a video of you doing your crazy, funny stuff.
Hmm.
So yeah, the live aspect is really important. And I think the other part is accountability, where you have to be there at that time, and maybe is that something that ADHD people sometimes have the difficult time to be accountable and
Yeah.
to right. So it's
Yeah.
for
Something.
to be there and to do it now, not later and procrastinate. Right, you have to be there at that time. That's the life. If you miss the bus. Right, it's the only time that you can get that. And I was thinking perhaps even in terms of emotional regulation, right? So we know that some people that are dysregulated might uh, make other people dysregulated, meaning if you're angry, someone else can be angry. But we also know that if someone is calm and brings you into that peace and happiness and compassion and
Mm,
worry-free zone, then you're gonna also help. It's gonna help you co-regulate your emotions, right?
for sure. Yeah, absolutely. It's going to help you knowing that somebody else is on the call going through a similar process as you, and you're in this together with other people.
Well, I love that you're being so open, and I don't like the word authentic. I'm writing a book that says don't be authentic. Just being yourself and being open and flexible to share your experience, the science that you've learned, and some people that you've talked to. We do have a little bit more time. Those who want to stick around, we are being unconventional. We don't have a set time, but we will continue on because this is such an interesting subject. And uh, Mark is an expert in the neuroscience, the psychology, and the live experience. So glad that I can talk to you and learn more. I mean, I know of it, but it's never the same as having experienced it and having so many concrete example. I love the fact you're saying I walk in a room and I don't know why I'm there, right? Right. So like, and right. So did you know that we were doing a podcast? Was that okay? Did you, why am I here with Chris again? What's going on?
Yeah, exactly. I think we have a question in the chat though. Can someone develop ADHD due to external factors like TikTok, social media, etc., or are they just amplifiers of ADHD symptoms? This is an excellent question. Um, I think that both could be true, both of those things, so that somebody, it's a spectrum, right? It's not exactly black white. You have it or you don't have it. I think people have higher degree of it than other people, and there could be other people who have some ADHD, but not that much. Um, so, for example, like my dad, right? He successful career person. You became a doctor, went to medical school. That requires a lot of focus, and he did it all without ADHD medications, right? In a time where they didn't have the ubiquity of mobile devices and internet. Nowadays, my dad is close to retirement, and he's going on his phone like every night before bed and scrolling on these YouTube shorts. And and I'm thinking like, man, if you grew up during this time, like it would have been a lot more difficult for you to go to medical school than it was back then, right? So
Yeah.
it's just, I don't think people should blame themselves perhaps for the inattention and distractibility. It's they're a product of their environment. That's all it is.
And thanks for mentioning that. And yeah, we never try to suggest that anyone should blame themselves. We're trying to actually encourage acceptance and awareness. Um, and that reminds me, in like the device, right? We're actually doing. Oh yeah, today we're in Vancouver doing our scientific conference, at the Canadian Psychological Association, and tomorrow Aisha and our team will be presenting our findings in
Hmm.
the afternoon. If you're in Vancouver, feel free to go check that out. Um, in terms of what types of research that we found, and we're doing another EEG study looking at what's the difference between resting state, so just normal, Mark, Chris,
Hmm.
whatever, and then meditation, right? So some type of mindfulness meditation, or going to nature or seeing nature versus your phone, right? So we're doing a study about that, but you can imagine what the outcome will be. Uh, and there's a lot of peer-reviewed study that talk about nature, right? So we talked about the past. Not only do we have more device, but we have more people living in cities than ever.
Yeah.
Then we have people staying out inside more, right?
Hmm.
So nature is actually, there's many studies that I read that correlates the exposure to nature with the increase in attention. Right? And we know that ADHD is the lack of focused attention, right? So
Yeah.
one of the things we talked about mindfulness, we talked about going to the gym, we talked about food, we talked about doing our resets, of course, which we will include some nature thoughts if you're not in nature during the reset. But actually going, for a walk outside in a park, in a forest. In Japan, they call it forest bathing, right? So they figured out a long time ago that it's good for you to be in the forest for a while. And that's something that is non-pharmaceutical. You can still have your pill and go to nature. That's up to you. But definitely should be one of the things to keep in mind that might help.
Yeah, I find it interesting on that subject that a lot of people, when they take psychedelics, they want to go into nature and they want to be reconnected with
Yeah.
with the world, right?
Yeah.
Right? Is that and that they were like, okay, like this is back to where I came from, and reset the internal levels. Not encouraging anybody listening to this to take psychedelics, but
Well, we know that psilocybin has been approved in some countries, in Portugal and also in Canada for some, actually from some addiction treatment, right? So it
yeah,
might be substance abuse, but it could be,
for
behavioral
sure.
gambling to technical addiction. So again, we're not prescribing any drugs in any country, but there is some just science that says that psilocybin helps you. Guess what? Lower your default mode network, right?
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
exactly what it does.
It could be an interesting topic for next time's podcast, whether what the effect of these psychedelics are and
We have
on our attention.
a fun guy delivered to our home before the podcast.
Yeah,
Uh,
we take some psilocybin.
so, what would you say that like you're expressing, and really again, thank you for sharing that. It's not everyone that can talk about difficult things in their life, but I really appreciate you sharing this to me and to everyone listening. What did you learn from this in terms of building resilience for yourself and helping others build resilience, especially in this digital world that's bombarding us?
I feel like what I experience is actually not so unique. I think many people are experiencing. And if you're listening to this and what I've said resonates with you, please reach out, right? You don't have to suffer, and it's really difficult in today's modern world to sometimes achieve what you want to focus. And yeah, it's tough, but there is help, and there's a solution for every problem in life.
Good to know. What would you think could be like the next cultural shift? Because now we're seeing increased ADHD, ADD symptoms, increased medication, increased
Mm.
distraction, increased distress, increased loneliness, and decreased purpose and meaning, and maybe nature. So that doesn't sound good to me. So what are you going to do about this, Mark?
Well, I think there's an interesting argument saying that AI is going to take over all the boring jobs that we are having trouble doing anyways, and
Hmm.
that there's going to be a shift more towards creative work for human beings, which I find really interesting. Right, I don't think we're at that point yet, but we're already starting to see layoffs, like mass layoffs of like tech workers and like people getting replaced by AI.
Yeah.
Um, so probably in around 50 years from now, I would say that most jobs will be replaced by AI,
Is
in
that a
my
so
view.
you're firing me, Mark? Is that today? My last day?
Not for 50 years. I think 50 years we're I don't know if we'll be around in 50 years.
Yeah. So, but is there a way that I mean, that internally we are presenting an AI conference
Yep.
today. We are going to be in San Francisco to talk about our findings. We're having devices that are using tech, but for good or for positive things, right? So, is there a way to use AI to help people have focus, or is it doomsday that they will
Yeah.
automatically focus?
No, there's some ways. I mean, for task management, for example, like AI can be good. Like you can set it up in a way so that you get notifications, Pomodoro technique, combine these things so that you spend 2 hours on a certain task and then you get a notification to work on another task after another time. Block out any distracting websites while you're trying to achieve deep focus and just get to work.
Yeah, I mean, I've used Pomodoro. I think there's better techniques like Flomodoro. I really believe in the concept. Not believe I've used, and I think that especially for neurodivergent people, the flow
Hmm.
is a very good concept because it's not time based. It's more of are you able to gain that sustained focus, which as we also do in the research, when time disappears, right? So that's where you want to be in awe and flow state, and then you become the most productive, motivated, and indestructible human being, right?
Yeah, I have to check out the Flomodoro. I haven't used that before.
Yeah. So that's kind of using the flow as a barometer instead of specific time, right? So
Oh,
and
interesting.
coach you in all those techniques, and yeah, I'll explain that to you or anyone that wants on a different podcast. Um, my kind of last real topic I want to broach is: do you feel that it's okay to talk about ADHD in the workplace, and what has that done to you and the team? And should
Yeah.
other people start to talk about this, and in what way that you think might be the most productive, right? So all the people out there that might have had been diagnosed, have symptoms, that might be on medication or not, or struggling, what's the best practice that you'd say, Mark?
I think it's okay to talk about it, and I don't think it's something to be shameful about. It's not like we're saying we're a criminal, right? Or we have this background. Like I think ADHD, it's becoming more and more normalized. I think people are realizing that it's not something to feel ashamed of. And at the end of the day, companies just care about results. They don't care if you're like disabled or if you have ADHD or you're missing an eye. If you achieve the result that they want, they don't care. If you have ADHD, the company's attitude would probably be, okay, try to figure it out. Take medication, do whatever you can. and help us achieve that result. Um, the sad reality is in like the capitalistic society that we live in, if a company says, oh, you have ADHD, we're gonna like accommodate for you, that could possibly be a competitive disadvantage for that company, right? Unfortunately. So they can be understanding, but they also have to say like, hey, we'll provide you with funds to get a prescription for ADHD. Um, we'll try to support you in a way, right? But we need to move fast, right? We need to move really fast here because the competition is the name of the game. So I think, yeah, it can be spoken about openly. I don't think there should be a stigma around it at all.
Yeah, and I think what we've tried to do today is demystify like what is the cause, what is the context, and to
Yeah,
find tools, right? And we also found strengths, right? So again, humor, creativity, maybe finding puzzles, and I'm
yeah,
sure there are other strengths that we can also discover and talk. And if you have ADHD, please message us privately
please
or
do.
telling like the amazing side of ADHD because uh, there is no wrong or bad, there is no good or bad, but there is just exploring with curiosity, right? So thanks for taking the time to explore this topic. And I also want to say that it is true that it might still have some stigma and some issues, but it's always easier if you're dealing with it with an open, communicative way than trying
Yep.
to hide it and trying to balance it and then have the shame, right? So, like, yeah, I'm sorry, I was distracted. I didn't do that. It is more difficult for me than others, but I'll do that, right? It's not to excuse your actions or lack of action, but it's more to kind of find the way to communicate and to be accountable of what you know about yourself and others. So if you have teammates also that are perhaps struggling or perhaps making great jokes, tell them that we love ADHD, according to Chris and Mark. Okay.
Absolutely.
For anyone listening, if you feel that that could be relatable to you, reach out if you want to hear some different context, different issues that are dear to you in the field of mental health and wellness and well-being and happiness. We are here almost every Friday,
Yep.
and that's the plan until life will throw us, whatever it chose. But that's the plan. So please contact us with some ideas, with some questions, and then if you had one suggestion, one habit, one thing that you could tell someone that feels that might have distraction issues or ADHD to do this weekend, this week, what would it be, Mark?
First off, focus on getting 8 hours of good sleep per night. Most health problems, actually, I would say a large majority of mental health issues going on in society are due to poor sleep quality. So make sure you get good sleep hygiene. And then secondly, try to start a meditation routine, 10 minutes a day. Join one of our digital resets and just experience it for yourself. And try to just build up a small habit.
Thanks. Yeah, our resets are 25 minutes, not the prescribed 5 or 10 minutes that most other apps or people tell you you'll be fine in 5 minutes. 5 minutes, you barely have time to get out of your thoughts, and I don't find that it's good enough to really reset. And science also says it's 22 or 23 minutes. That's why we're using that 25-minute number.
Yep.
Uh, so don't think that you can cop out and do a 2, 3, 6 minutes meditation. It does help. You can. I do mini meditations around the day, but it's not the same as a complete nervous reset. Um, and then you mentioned taking the time. I would also say, like, and again, study shows that social interaction helps gain attention, right? So if you're being distracted, surround yourself with people that you love, that you like, that you find funny,
Yep.
that you're funny with, and be open to say who you are, how you feel, how your brain works. And the more people will, let you explore and be yourself, be present, you will feel also more attention and care and positivity to move on and get some of the goals that you might have. Like, are you doing your goals, Mark? Even though you have ADHD, are you doing what you want?
Yeah, I found a system that works well for me and using it to like break down a lot of tasks. and I mean goals into smaller tasks.
Great. So if there's no further question, it was a pleasure, like always, to chat
Likewise.
with you. Do you have any question for me, your non-ADHD friend?
Um, yeah, I would love to know what the world looks like through your eyes. Experience it, experience that one for one day,
Look, you can.
please. I'll
Yeah.
take I'll take them.
Yeah, we all have different brains. We all, have different experiences. But that's the beauty about communication and awareness. No judgment, full disclosure, and vulnerability is actually what will give you more strength. Not to see any failure, not to see any struggle as
Mhm.
unsurmountable, or not even to judge them as failure. Just to go ahead and always happy to chat with you, Mark, and to work with you,
Likewise.
and the crazy team that is working so hard with us to make all these things happen, the podcast, the products, the research, the scientific conferences that we're attending. Thank you, everyone in the team for making all happen every day. Even those with ADHD that are doing it, Mark included, and a few others. Thank you all, and thank you for listening. Wish you guys a great weekend. We'll be there next week, maybe with some news from the two conferences that we're attending, and with some different topics. Reach out if you have something specific you want to hear from us, and have a great weekend. Cheers.
See you next time. Bye bye.